This conference will now be recorded.
As James comes in here with his toy. Good evening. So tonight we're going to be doing chapter 16, which is the first lesson in the indicative noun system, verb system. So tonight we're doing the present active indicative. And by the time we're done, that phrase, present active indicative, is actually going to mean something to you. Okay? So in English, whenever we talk about the present tense, in the present tense, whenever we talk about time, as in when it's happening, it's usually in the present. Okay, there's a few exceptions to that, but almost always it's in the present. As far as aspect goes, it's imperfective. Can anyone think back to a couple weeks ago and explain to me what it means to be imperfective aspect? Does Woodbury as a collective have a an inkling of what that means?
No, not without going back and looking.
Okay, well, that's fine. So perfective is kind of the mile-high view that you see the complete action together. Imperfective is seeing the individual parts. So the way we kind of bring this idea over is whenever we do most of our translations, we're going to be translating it in the present progressive tense. So instead of saying I study, we're usually going to be putting I am studying. It kind of gives that idea of movement that we have from the present Greek tense and tries to express it in English some. Doesn't get all the way there, but it at least gives people this idea of there is this active activity that we are witnessing. Okay. Voice, we're going to talk about, is active. Active means the noun, which is the subject of our sentence, is going to be performing whatever verb that we're talking about. And the movement is indicative as opposed to the non-indicative. Okay. Now, if you have your book, this is on page 162. This explains how we form the active forms of verbs. Okay. So for each of these, each time we do a new tense, he's going to have one of these charts. And it's going to tell you the basics of how we make it. This is the simplest one. And this is sort of the basis of all the other ones. We're going to have these three parts, and then the absence or addition, the absence of certain parts or the addition of other parts is what's going to distinguish the other tenses from the present. So you see here, the first thing we have is a present tense stem. I know this is going back a little bit, but does anybody remember what I said the difference between the root and the stem is? If you happen to have your book, it's at the bottom of page 162. And I'm also going to be occasionally sipping tea so I can continue to talk. So if you hear me slurp something, that's why. Okay, so he's got it down here at the bottom of page 162. The root is the basic form of a verb, the most basic. And then the next thing is the tense stem is the most basic form of a verb in a particular tense. Okay, and that is going to be something that we're going to have to distinguish more later. For most of the words that we're going to be learning this week, particularly, if you know how to take away the ending, what you're going to be left with is going to be the present tense stem. So you see the present tense stem, then you're going to have a connecting vowel. For the purpose of this week, you're either going to have an omicron or an epsilon. And with one exception, an omicron lengthens to an omega. But besides that, you're going to have either an omicron or an epsilon. And then the last thing you're going to have is primary active personal endings. Primary has to do with the words that are used without the augment, which is something we're going to learn later. Active means that the noun is doing the action of the verb, and then the personal endings has to do with what these are, okay? So for this first one, we've got 3 parts: present tense, stem, connecting vowel, primary, active, personal endings. So this is the chart that you're going to need to memorize, okay? It's not terribly complicated. I'll tell you that I just learned it whenever I was going through this initially, I just learned it with luo. That word means I loose. And I just learned how to say it. Luo, lues, lue, luamen, lueta, luusen. Just over and over again. O, ace, a, amen, eta, usen. Or usi if you prefer. Okay? So whenever we have these primary active personal endings, you don't need any nouns to actually tell you what the word means. Luo means I am loosing, even if you do not have a noun with it. That word alone represents I am loosing. Lues is you are loosing, and so on. One thing that you will see over here, that there's a complicated way of how we get that second person singular, of how we get from epsilon sigma to epsilon iota sigma. It's not terribly important you know it right now. I think it actually comes back whenever we talk about in the next chapter contraction. But the big thing that he points out, and I agree with him on this particular thing, it's a good idea to go ahead and memorize those things in the far right column. You see how he has for the actual personal endings is nothing, sigma, iota, men, te, nsi. Okay, the reason for that is whenever we go back and learn secondary personal endings, if you already know the real primary personal endings, it's a whole lot easier to learn the secondary active personal endings, okay? So my advice would be just memorize this slide. And if anybody wants, I will send out this slideshow whenever I get done. I have to convert it. It's in Keynote right now, but I will send that out as a PDF. That's what I'll do. Send it out as a PDF so you guys will have this. But this particular slide, this is really the bulk of your memory work for this particular chapter, okay? We already mentioned this. The most basic form of a verb is the root. The stem is the most basic form in a particular tense. And then these are the rules of how you know whether to use an omicron or an epsilon. If it's a mu or a nu, you use an omicron. Anything else uses an epsilon. And you notice there in the first person singular, we lengthen the omicron to an omega because it would, lega would sound funny, or lua. Okay, and that just shows that again. So it's legamen, that's we say, and then legeta is you all say. Right. Personal endings. They agree with the subject, just like we had with a me. If you have a second person singular, you're going to have a noun, or you all would be that particular, or the second person singular would be you. You're going to have a second person singular verb also. They're going to agree. All right. The primary personal endings that we're learning today are the first of 4 sets. And you can kind of see he's made a quadrant on 165. In the back of your book, it shows everything. But really, I would just focus on this one section for right now. Learn it really well, be able to repeat it. Okay. And this is what he's talking about. So primary active is what we're learning this time. There it is again. All right. And I mentioned this before. Some of you actually got extra points on the test for this. If you put the noun, or the pronoun particularly, it is usually for emphasis. Ego agapo Robin. I myself love Robin. Robin happens to be the name of Bill Mountain's wife. There's also this idea of the reflexive. In general, what you need to notice is that it adds emphasis. That's the big thing I want you to point out. Right? All right, so if you look, this is on page 167. He lays out the beginning of the master indicative verb chart. So working from left to right, the first thing you see is the present, the tense, which is in our case present active. That's what we've learned tonight. Next, you're going to have augment / reduplication. If you look at this, there's a blank there. There's not that in the present active indicative. Next, you're going to see the tense stem. We're going to use present tense stems. Under tense formative, there's nothing because there is no tense formative for the present active indicative. The connecting vowel is going to be either omicron or epsilon. We're going to use primary active personal endings. And the first person singular paradigm follows luo. Okay. If you want to see what the complete verb paradigm looks like for the indicative, that's on page 429. 429. There you have the complete list. I will tell you it's quite a bit easier just to learn it as we go along and learn it line by line, because you can turn back there. It gets pretty overwhelming pretty quick. So this is actually a pretty short chapter. And you can see here, with the present active indicative, we need to tell the difference between a verbal root and a verbal stem. We need to be able to tell what a connecting vowel is. In this particular one, it's omicron or epsilon. And then we have to learn our primary active personal endings. And there they are. One other thing, if you have your textbook open, the first one is on page 168. If you notice, there is a definition, and under it, there's another line of words. Those are the different stems for the different, excuse me, those are the different stems for the different tenses. As he puts here, if you're making vocab cards, I'll go ahead and write them out, but you don't need to memorize them yet, because until we get to, I think the imperfect is the first one that we do. It may be future. But until you get to the other tenses, it's not incredibly, future is the first one to learn. It's not incredibly important for you to memorize those. But I would go ahead and learn what the root is. So learn the definition, learn the root. Okay. So a lot of these we learned whenever we did things the first semester, which would have been this time last year. So akuo, it's where we get acoustic from, means I hear. He points out there it can also mean I learn or obey. Blepo. For some reason, I always like the word blepo. Blepo means I see or I look at. Echo. Echo means I have or I hold. And one thing to point out here, whenever you look at the root on this particular one, it's sigma epsilon key, which looks a lot different than the form. There's a reason for that, and whenever we start talking about some of the other tenses, that'll become important. For right now, echo means I have. I think you skipped a word. I'll tell you in your book, the next one is Lego. Lego means I say. Luo means I loose or I untie. Namas. Namas means law or principle. Hapu. Hapu means where. Pistuo. Pistuo means I believe. We're going to start running into a lot of these as we start learning words. So we learned that pistis means faith. Pistos means faithful. Well, now we have pistuo, which is I believe or I have faith in. So you can see how all those are related to one another. Prosopon. Prosopon means face or appearance. Tata. Tata means then. If it's at the beginning of the sentence, sometimes we'll translate it as therefore. To floss. To floss means blind. It's not terribly important, but I will tell you that the way I remembered this was that I always thought it would be hard to floss if you were blind. So I don't know if that's helpful to you. Stuck with me. And kara means joy or delight. Joy or delight. Okay. Anyone have any questions on that section?
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. So I want to help you guys with these since you're just now learning it. This Woodbury, will you unmute your mic?
Sure.
We voted.
Okay. Okay. So what I want you to do is open. Do we have at least one copy of the book there?
Of the book, the book itself, yes.
Okay. So turn to 163.
Okay.
All right. So, Jen, are you there closest to the computer?
Yes.
Okay. Why don't we have you go first then? All right.
Thanks.
All right. So this word is lagusen. Okay.
Okay.
Lagusen. Now, looking at this word, which ending does it have?
It has the third plural, the very last one.
Third person plural. Okay. Now, you don't know this, but the word lego means I say or I speak. Okay. So, how would you translate this?
They are speaking. They
Good.
speak.
For the purpose of this class, or at least for the first part of this when we're learning it, I want you to always translate it the way you did first
Okay.
in the present progressive form. So they are speaking. I will tell you that from a what is appropriate, they speak is completely correct. That is a perfectly way to render that. But because we're trying to sort of learn the aspect as we go along, I want us to do that at least for right now. Okay. Okay. So now that we know what it means, we're going to parse it. Okay. So the way I want you to do this is, you see that little thing that we had? This isn't any help. Okay. So what I want you to do is, like you said, start out with person. Then we're going to do, I'm trying to figure out which order he wants you to do it. Usually the way I was taught to do it is
Page 60.
person, number, tense, and then mood. Person, number, tense, mood. Okay. So what person did we say this was?
Third.
And number?
Plural.
Plural. Tense?
It'll be present.
And I left out one. Is it active, passive, or middle?
Be active because we're working on present active verbs, right?
Mood is indicative. Okay. The answer for mood for all of these is indicative.
Okay.
So third person, plural, present, active, indicative. Okay. And not to spoil anything for anybody, but for all of these tonight, the last three things will be present, active, indicative, because we've only learned one so far. Okay.
That's the tense.
I thought that was active.
No, present tense, active voice.
Oh, okay, I missed that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, he usually puts it the way that he wants to do it. I don't see it on here. I think he took that out of the book. But anyway, yes. So person, number, tense, voice, mood. That's how we're going to do it. Okay. Who else is there in Woodbury?
I think to throw them all under the bus. Kathy, Jerry, and Janet.
I'm going to the bathroom. I'll be back next week.
They are all right here, ready for the next one.
I'll try to go next.
Go, Kathy.
All right, let's go ahead, Kathy. So the word is the actual lexical form of this is akuo, which, like I said, means I hear. So looking at that chart that I have on 163, which ending does this match up with?
63.
Let's see.
It's kind of in the middle of the page above the footnotes.
Is it that third singular,
Yes. So third person singular, and then what did I say the last three are going to be?
you said present, active, present, indicative.
So third person singular, present, active, indicative. Now, I told you that this word means I hear. Akuo means I hear. So in the third person singular, using that present progressive that I talked about, how would you translate that?
So maybe he is hearing.
He, she, or it is hearing. Exactly. All right. Let's have Dad do this one. Pistuamen. Pistuamen. So pistuo means I believe.
Yeah.
Okay. So go ahead.
Is that gonna be first person plural?
First person plural. And then the rest of it is tense,
Gonna be present tense,
voice,
active,
and then mood.
indicative.
Perfect. And how would you translate that? Once again, using that present progressive tense. Pistuo means I believe.
Would it be we are believing?
We are believing, exactly. All right. Janet, you want to get this last one? Luis.
Okay, it's second singular, present, active, indicative.
Correct. Luo me. Actually, it's the one that's written down there.
It means what?
I was going to say it means luo means I loose, but it's actually exactly what it says right there.
Oh, and you are Lucy.
Yes, that's what it means.
What is he talking about? Okay, you are Lucy.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
So second person singular, present active indicative, inflected would be you are loosing. Does that work? Everybody understand how we got all those?
Yes.
What was the?
Like I said, the big thing is just memorizing the Oase Amaneta Usi. If you get that, that's really all you need for this chapter because we're not learning any of the other things. So this is probably the easiest we're going to do this semester. But if you memorize the chart there on 163, you're going to be able to look at 90% of the verbs in John's gospel and be able to tell at least what tense it's in. John uses something called the historical present a lot. So he's talking about things in the past. So we would translate it probably as with an ed, but he uses the present to express this. And like I said, if you take and open up the Gospel of John in Greek, you're going to be surprised of how much of what we're doing tonight you see in it, which is encouraging. And most of the time, if you're reading a gospel, this is just for your information, it's usually going to be third person because usually books like that are talking about things. In the epistles, it's usually going to be second person because usually somebody's being talked to. All right, Gregory, do you and Ezekiel have a book?
No, we don't.
Okay. Do you have a picture of this paradigm anywhere to look at?
The OSA paradigm?
Yeah.
I do.
Okay. Well, why don't you go ahead and try number 5 here? It's pretty easy.
Okay. This be first person, singular, present, active, indicative.
Correct. And
Or
akuo,
and would you translate that like I hear?
I hear, or if we did it with this present progressive I'm talking about, how would you say that?
Like I am hearing?
Yep.
Something like I am hearing.
I am hearing, correct. All right. I am hearing James yell my name. Akuo. Akuo Iakabe. Let's see. Aregace. That would be Anamamu. Okay. Ezekiel, you want to do one? Ezekiel there. I guess I didn't ask that. Okay. Sammy and Ralphie, do you guys have a textbook?
What editions is it supposed to be from?
It doesn't matter. It's just you need to have this paradigm that shows the OASA Amanita Usi thing on it. Do you have that? In this one, it's figure 16.6. I'm not sure what it is in the third edition.
What is it supposed to be of?
It's got Luo, Lue, Slue, Luaman, Lueta, Luusi.
Oh, yeah, I see it.
Okay. All right. So blepo means I see. Can you tell me what blepusi means?
Wait, did you say blepo means I see?
Blepo. Yep. So what does blepusi mean? First off, with that ending, what would be the person?
Third person plural?
Correct. And then what did I say the last part's going to be for all these?
The last person?
No, sorry. Tense, voice, and mood. The name of the chapter.
Present, active, indicative?
Perfect. And then how would you translate blepusi, knowing that blepo means I see?
They are seen?
Exactly. All right. Is Ralphie there?
Yes. Yes.
All right. All right. You want to try Lue? Share the chart with them because it's kind of hard if you've never done these without the chart.
It's third person.
Yep. Singular, plural?
Singular.
Exactly. And then what I say to say after those two things?
Person ending or
Present. Yep. Present. Then the voice is
a voice is active.
Yep. Yep. Present, active, and then all of the ones this semester are going to be
Indicative.
indicative. All right. And it's translated right on the page for you. What does Lue mean?
It is loosening
There you go. He, she, or it is loosened. Exactly right. I'll do these last couple for you. So, legata. Legata is a second person plural, present active indicative from Lego, which means you are saying. You all are saying. That'd probably be easier. You all are saying. Okay. We won't do that one. That one's, we'll come back to that. We'll do that one next week. This is not a verb. All right. Pistues. Pistues is from pistuo. So this one is second person singular, present active indicative, and it means you are believing. Okay. So for next week, if you guys want to, if you got the book there, I want to do warm up A or alpha, beta, gamma, delta, and epsilon. Sorry, there's a little bit of a lag here. Okay. And then I want to do translation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 10, and then an additional 12. Sorry, I clicked one too many times. So 1 through 5, translations 1 through 5, 8, 10, and then additional 12. Okay. All right, work on those for next week. We're going to be doing a lot of parsing of the actual verbs. So be prepared with the verbs. We're not going to be doing as much parsing with the nouns because I'm not assuming that you know everything to know about nouns, but I'm assuming that you know what you need to know. So we're going to focus on looking at the verbs, parsing those, and making sure we have a good handle on this before we move into the next section. Okay. What questions do you guys have? Anything else people think needs to be on the recording? First quiz will be 2 weeks from tonight. So not next week, but the following.